Although communication studies are very popular at Utrecht University nowadays, my alma mater considers an explanation of research presented during the public defense as something superfluous. That's a pity, because the defense as such is completely incomprehensible for non-specialists. The audience has no clue what kept the young doctor, thank you, out of sight during 3-4 years. Hereby, for my friends and family, an explanation that will clarify my absence, I hope. In case you happen to be in Utrecht on September 26, my defense is at 4:15 sharp at the Domplein, and, more important, drinks from 5:30 on. The title of my doctoral thesis is Microtones According to Augustine. Neumes, Semiotics and Rhetoric in Romano-Frankish Liturgical Chant. I will first explain microtones. I will let you taste a fragment, and subsequently I will chop the title in easy digestible bites. Here we go. Nowadays, in Western musical traditions, we mainly know whole tones and semitones, the white and black keys of the piano, so to say. Until about 1250, quarter tones were part of the European tradition, pitch distances smaller than a semitone. Western musicologists call them microtones, but most of us would call them out of tune. Listen to the quarter tones in the next fragment, a recording from the Coptic liturgy as performed nowadays. We start at the end of the title. What is meant by Romano-Frankish liturgical chant? Liturgy refers to Christian medieval worship. I mainly analyzed mass chants. Romano-Frankish is better known as Gregorian. It is the liturgy the Carolingians imported from Rome during the 8th century. Intended as a copy, it turned out as a fusion product. In order to improve the acceptance of the Roman rites north of the Alps, Charlemagne Propaganda invented Gregory the Great as composer of this chant corpus, not unlike the way executive boards hire McKinsey to tell the employees why it is good they will be sacked. It simply sells better. Romano-Frankish chant, commonly called Gregorian chant, is monophonic and without instrumental accompaniment. Neumes. Neumes are the oldest musical signs in European culture. They presumably were invented in northwestern Europe during the late 8th, early 9th century. Until that time, chants had to be learned by heart, so until around the 9th century it was an oral tradition. Semiotics. Semiotics is the theory of signs. For example, a red light can be a sign. In a traffic light, it means stop. In a red light district, it means welcome, which underlines that interpreting signs by definition is a matter of context. In musicology, semiotics is about how the signs applied for music notation convey information, and what sort of information. The most important result of my comparative analysis is that microtones had no aesthetical functions, were not embellishments nor part of melodic formal systems. That was what musicologists have been looking for in vain since the middle of the 19th century, when manuscripts with signs for microtones were rediscovered. Microtones were pitches triggered by the meaning of word or expressions in which they occurred. Microtones are pitches that signal text information, as if a horn or a bell sounded. For musicologists and linguists, this requires quite some reorientation. In my thesis I proposed some new terminologies for musical signs that provide meanings somewhere halfway musical and verbal texts. Rhetoric. Rhetoric is a central theme in my doctoral thesis. Rhetoric is the art and technique of motivating and convincing an audience by logical arguments and by emotions. The microtonal signals refer to a set of rhetorical principles, concepts known as affect, logic and loci. Medieval monks accentuated affectional and emotional concepts by employing microtones in words referring to the fear of the Lord or to the devil, to pleading and praising. Verbal logic could be accentuated by putting microtones on conjunctions. The Lord is our Savior because he resurrected. Loci are more complicated. They refer to narrative elements directly, like topographical names or numbers. Indirect loci are metaphors, for instance. Jerusalem may be a direct locus, but in 9 out of 10 cases it refers to the church as an institution or as a community of believers. These and many other kinds of indirect references are explained by the church fathers. Here you see an excellent example of how microtones were employed. The red and circled neumes represent microtones. The words in red letters correspond with the microtonal phrases. The expressions 1 to 4 are metaphors of the devil. They are loci, but they refer to both fear as to indirect loci. Church fathers have extensive comments on these lines. A second rhetorical figure here is an ellipsis, a shortened expression. Non timebis a, you will not be afraid of, applies to all 4 references to the devil, but is not repeated after verse 5. In order to neutralize the ellipsis, the shortened expression, the scribe or composer performer accentuates the first word of verse 6. Non timebis a sagitta, you will not be afraid of the arrow. Who said the medieval culture was a primitive one? And now the clue of my title, Microtones according to Augustine. About half the microtones in the sources consulted refer to loci, and the major part to indirect loci, explained by St. Augustine, a rhetorician, bishop and philosopher who lived in the North African, now Algerian, coastal city of Hippo around the year 400. My hypotheses are supported by a sample of about 500 microtones from 7 manuscripts, written from Utrecht in the north to Cluny in the south, roughly between 1000 and 1250. If you have acute insomnia and a prescription from your physician, you may obtain a PDF file of my doctoral thesis after my defense for free.